Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Finance and Audit Standing Committee on September 5th, 2017. As always, we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. We have a motion to adopt the agenda. Moved by Peter, seconded by Ted. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We have minutes to approve from our July 11th Finance and Audit Standing Committee. Moved by Peter, seconded by Patty. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, we'll move on to our business for today. And the first up is the 2017 Financial Plan Variance Report as of June 30th.
Good afternoon, everyone. Presented before you is the 2017 Variance Report as of June 30th. This is a high-level financial update on spending against the 2017 budget. The 2017 variance indicates the balance remaining, and in the far column is the percentage of budget used. Between 43 and 50% range is a good marker, meaning that they used the budget, half the budget. And it means that it's in line with the budget. If they are below, this could be a timing variance with invoices coming in or when the project has begun. Something to be noted for this year is the utility payments collection is actually higher this year because we have the due date of July the 4th. This year, by the end of June, we collected 56% of utility payments. Last year, at the end of June, it was 43%. And looking at the due date of July 4th, this year, we've collected 83% of payments, compared to 52% in 2016. Also listed in the variance report is just the capital projects and where they are at the moment. A lot of them are limited spending because the projects have either just begun or once again timing difference with invoices. Quarter 3, the Q3 report, will give more details of the capital projects and what their standings are and their statuses. Is there any questions?
Any questions, Council?
Can we just have minutes to look it over this?
Yes, absolutely. Council just got this report, so we're just...
Well, it's kind of interesting that the percentage is up so high. I wonder if that means everybody's making a little more money.
Well, last year, people had the opportunity to pay by December 31st, and this year it was on July the 4th.
So that's changed.
Yes.
We introduced the interest rates kicking in at July 4th, same as similar to taxes. So the collections, so we saw a very favorable increase in collections.
You could tell it was churning. I think that's relatively good news. Was that sort of where you expected it to be? And is there a way to articulate clearly that benefit to the greater tax base in a way? And I know we talked about this through the budget in terms of people who pay on time are actually subsidizing those who, the whole system. I'm just wondering if there's a way we can communicate that.
Through the chair, we can take that away certainly and see if there's a way to message that out in terms of actual dollar value and savings to us in terms of lost interest. We can certainly take that away. I don't have it on at my fingertips today, but obviously collections, you are striving wherever you have accounts receivable to have your collections on a timely basis. So we're pleased with the uptake. We're still not at the same level that we are with taxation, but that was a really big leap to go up over 30%.
Can I just follow up? Did you have a goal in mind, or did that exceed your expectations?
I'm pretty pleased with it, for sure. I was hoping for about 85, so we got pretty close to where we hoped to.
Thanks. Doug and...
Thank you. One is protective services, which is at the top of page 2 of 4 of this handout. And so the number that's there, according to the note, is basically just the first quarter billing, but it's 30.9% of the budget. Is that front-end loaded, or because otherwise it would be 25% theoretically of the budget instead of 30%?
So I'd have to investigate that further to see what, if there was any accruals or anything left in there, but as far as I know, that should be pretty close. I don't recall any real cyclical nature of that contract, so again, we can take it away and have a look, but the contracts generally, we come in with a little bit of a surplus by year end, so there must be some cyclical nature to it, but we'd have to look at staffing and everything. They bill us on actual, or if there was any kind of capital expenditure in there in the first quarter.
That's just such a
Like-
significant budget item that I was just wondering, because if we're 30 instead of 25%, then if you take that
In
for the whole
theory, it
year,
could
then
go
we're
further.
120% of budget, and that is a big number.
Yeah.
So anyway.
I can also check to make sure that our retroactive payments have also been pulled back out of provision, so it may be that the retroactive salaries had gone through on that first contract, because they were doing contract negotiations, so I can take that back and have a closer look at it and just make sure. But that would call for it, because then we'd be bringing in the provision to offset that past year's expense, and that could account for that difference.
Thank you.
That's good, thanks.
Susan and then Becky.
Thank you. 52%, was it 52% of the sewer and water were both collected as of June 30th? So does that mean the other percentage was not, that's not such a change from the other percentage of sewer and water fees collected? What do you attribute that to? Do you think it's communication? 52% are collected as of June 30th. User fees are recognized at one time only, and 52% are collected.
Through the chair, just to be clear, often on June, like this report technically ends on June 30th.
Okay.
Our tax collection date is July 4th. So a lot of payments coming through banks, online payments, things like that, we wouldn't
you.
actually
That
have
makes
it
sense.
until July.
July.
So that's why we're bringing you the July 4th, just to
Yeah.
give you better understanding. We often see that lag in that 4
And-
days.
The other question I have is on the debt servicing, the amount of interest that we're paying on debt. Is there a way to make that a little bit easier to, there's solid waste debt, there's water systems debt, fiscal service, other fiscal service and municipal debt. That totals almost $1 million in debt interest. Is there any way, and I know we get an amazing rate on that, is that just on using, borrowing money as because we're collecting taxes at a later date? How is that?
Sure. Thank you, through the chair. Basically, this is on the long-term debentures, so whatever past borrowing on capital expenditures. So hopefully I'm addressing your question, but we do break it by segmentation area, and it is the debt service. Generally, we do get favorable rates, but it'll depend on when that debt went to MFA through that time frame.
Thank you.
Is that
But
addressing
is
your...
there, I'm just wondering if there's a way to clearly communicate that to the public, if I'm having trouble understanding it in here. When you see a debt service, you're thinking that often we borrow money and pay it back when we collect, but that's a pretty significant amount of interest. If there's a way to reduce our interest payments in some way by, with money management, I'm not sure how that's communicated. When I look at that number, I think it's significant,
It is, yeah.
especially in our low budget, like when we have a $26 million budget. Yeah, $26 million budget, $1 million is going out in interest payments. I'm wondering if there's some way we can.
So actually, through the chair, we're actually at quite a healthy debt
Yes.
service level at about 14%, and actually a little bit lower right now. We're actually considered to be in a fairly good margin. And debt service obviously is quite substantial. If we had to actually fund
Yeah.
those capital expenditures, the impact on taxation would be very significant. So we're always going to be playing with debt and borrowing to make sure that we're spreading the cost, and philosophically to also make sure that our ratepayers aren't taking the full hit for something that will be in service for several years and service several taxpayers. So
That's an
it's
excellent
normal to have
explanation.
some debt financing.
But is it possible that we could have something written to explain that to the public? Because I think if you look at a sheet and just see debt servicing, and people think that they're paying that out of they are paying that out of taxes, but to spread out, I think that the explanation you gave is excellent. If there's some way we can communicate that to the public, that would be excellent. Thank you.
I'm sure our handy dandy communications department will help us figure out how to do that.
Thank you. I've got Ted and then Becky.
Yeah, maybe you could just give me government grants and that kind of stuff. Can you, how many grants, how much are we getting in grants?
Off the top of my head this year.
Well, it's got numbers down here, and I just know it's got 1.8 million and 5.7 million.
But how much have we collected to date? Is that your question?
Well, I'm just kind of curious as to, I brag to people about the amount of money we get in grants all the time. Is that the number?
And you're on page, sorry, which, just make sure.
First page.
Revenue, numbers first,
Yeah.
government grants.
Other government grants. So that would collect everything that was coming in from provincial or federal groups. And that would be the level of grant funding for that particular budget year. So if we went out and got, say, a $2.5 million grant on Dike, that would only include the million we were planning, 2/3 of the million we were planning to spend this year, for instance. So it's just that year's portion of grant funding. We have been very strong at at going after grants. Our engineering department has pulled in a lot of great grants. And
Yeah.
so certainly that's not representative of all the grants that we would currently have in the hopper, but it would be this budget year's.
And this might help explain, grants are claimed after the cost of incurred, so
Oh, yeah,
that's why the
yeah.
variance is.
But it's still 2.5 million in grants this year.
More than that.
1.85.
1.85 is the budget. Actual, it's, okay. Well, that's still pretty good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Doug, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. Just Councillor Chappelle's point about the debt interest, because there's one for, I guess, general government, 877, and then there's one for 16 for solid waste, one for 230 for water systems, and 205 for sewer systems. Is that pure interest or is that principal and interest?
In that particular area, we try to run it the same way that we run our bylaws. So the principal portions are down below. The debt principal repayments show lower in the report.
Oh,
That
way
would
down
just
there.
be interest and fiscal servicing up in the operating area, and then we show the principal reductions. Again, sort of municipal accounting versus regular world accounting. This document tries to bridge that and show what would happen on our financial statements would just be about interest and fiscal services, and then the principal repayments are down below. So the debt service is higher than what you're seeing here.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else,
Hadn't
Councillor?
got to that page yet.
And I do apologize for, I'm not sure why it didn't quite make the agenda, but I should have picked it up on Friday.
Anything else? All right. Thank you. Thanks, Ellen. Next up on the agenda is the Ice Arena Resurfacer and Aquatic Center UV Tender Award. You're welcome.
Good afternoon, Finance and Audit Committee. So I'm here today to advise you why it was necessary to award these two tenders when Council was not in session, which is inconsistent with purchasing policy and the purchasing delegation bylaw. So the first project was the Ice Arena Resurfacer Award, and a budget of $175,000 had been approved to buy the new ice resurfacer. We issued a tender to replace the machine in July, that closed at the end of July. And the two suppliers of machines in Western Canada both submitted bids, both of which met the criteria specified in the tender. And staff chose the lowest bid from Weimar at $150,000, which is within the budget. And Weimar also told us that if we were able to place the order immediately, that they had a machine available in Ontario that we could have within a month or so. Otherwise, we would be waiting up to 12 months for a new machine to be made. And also the alternative bid that came in from Crocker Equipment said that we could be waiting at least 7 months for a new machine if we had ordered from them. So under the policy, the CAO and the CFO may award contracts during August. However, the purchasing delegation bylaw does not provide for this exception to purchasing authorities. And so the amount is beyond the delegated authority. So staff discussed the situation with senior staff and the opportunity to put the order in immediately. And a decision was made at the beginning of August, following a discussion with the acting mayor, to approve the award of the tender in order to benefit from the early delivery. And since then, so the machine has been ordered, and we are currently waiting for the delivery. The second project was the UV light loops at the aquatic centre. So again, a budget of $195,000 was approved to install the loops at the pools this year. We hired a designer consultant for $17,000 back in June of this year, and that company issued the tender beginning of July, which closed beginning of August. We did receive 5 qualified submissions, and they were reviewed by the consultant, and a recommendation was made to award the tender to Davidson Brothers, which was the lowest bid, at $149,000, which is well within the budget that we had for construction of $178,000. Staff were then following the previous SLRD capital project approval process by seeking approval from the SLRD Director of Finance for awarding the contract, and then preparing the contract for signature by both the SLRD Director of Finance and also by the district CFO. However, it was during this process that the CFO explained that while the SLRD could certainly approve expenditure against an approved budget, they did not have the authority to enter into a contract on behalf of the district. And so, because timing was really important, because shutdown starts tomorrow, if we had waited any longer, we would not be able to have done this project during the shutdown. And so, again, staff consulted with the CAO, and it was agreed after consultation with the acting mayor in the middle of August that the project should be awarded in order for us to actually proceed with this project during the shutdown. So those are the 2 projects which are currently underway.
So Councillor Black and Wolf just said I should explain myself. And I was, for the benefit of the public, the acting mayor in August, and this is what happens when you leave in charge in August and everybody goes away.
My fault.
But in both cases, these were, from my perspective, as the decision maker in those issues, these were multiple bid issues reviewed by staff within budgeted amounts. The critical thing was timing. There was a benefit to doing it early, benefit to the community. So for those reasons, I made those decisions.
Thank you. Patty?
And we had actually discussed it before I left. So I actually said, I'm fine with it, why don't you talk to the acting mayor too? But yeah, I mean, it really was timing issues. And I know that a similar type tendering issue came up the year before, so we are going to talk about how we reconcile this misalignment of policies, so we can make sure we're not stumbling over ourselves again.
Any other questions, Council? Because we are going to talk about the delegating bylaw next.
No, we don't require anything that awards already.
All right. Thanks.
So
Okay.
thank you. And,
Thank you for your understanding. Okay, you don't need me anymore.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
We always need you.
All right, moving right along.
Can I just add something?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what was happening in the discussions with the acting mayor, sorry. My brain is going to be really slow today this morning. We did discuss another tender award that came up, and it was late, and it really didn't meet that criteria of the urgency, sort of the timing and the opportunity that was there, and it's actually on tonight's agenda, the trail machine. So I actually said the trail machine doesn't meet the litmus test, but these 2 definitely have a benefit. Just wanted to give that a little more context.
Thanks for that. All right. And then, as we have the August break and other issues that have come up, our purchasing delegation policy is in front of us this afternoon for discussion. So I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Chair Elliott, and thank you to our 2 acting mayor and mayor. We certainly did not intend for you to have to be thrown under the bus in that scenario, and we really appreciate the recognition of the timing, sensitivity, and the issues with that. So hopefully your fellow councillors do as well. It did bring up the question though as to why we hadn't dealt with the purchasing delegation and policy. So I'm going to talk to that a little bit, but let's just fire off with what is it we're going to be asking of you today and why we need it. So what we need and why we need it. We do need to come up with some kind of interim policy corrections and bylaw corrections for these administrative purposes. We are running into some issues where there's inconsistencies and problems between the bylaw itself and the policy. We are looking for some kind of opportunity to standardize some of our key issues because we're bringing on software now that will help us workflow, and we're running into workflow discussions and questions with the present purchasing regime and scenarios. And we just want to make sure for a decentralized system that we really have very clear direction and structure so that we can hold managers accountable to what they're supposed to do. And when there's so much ambiguity and inconsistencies, it's very difficult, to have them follow a policy that is very difficult to understand in the first place. So with that in mind, there are a number of items that we do believe we do need to address in the short term. Having said that, I think, why not a full review right now? Council's been asking for a new purchasing policy, and staff have also wanted one very desperately. It is a very old policy. To be honest, going in, tiptoeing in and trying to amend that policy is going to be extremely difficult because it really, frankly, needs to be put to bed and started fresh. We looked at that. We had hoped it would be part of the business processing, but with the technology transformation program, when you get into purchasing cultural shift, it is very substantial. It impacts the entire organization, it impacts our suppliers, and the change management process around it is pretty significant. We felt that that would be too much to bite off in terms of doing the business process around trying to do a full procurement revisit and thinking about whether procurement is really going to meet our needs going into the future, on top of already trying to resource and deal with the TTP project itself. So we did put it and defer it until 2018, which is when we had intended to deal with the purchasing policy. Unfortunately, we've come into these administrative issues time and time again, and we really do believe that there needs to be an administrative review, if nothing else. And so at this time, although we understand that there will absolutely be interest in doing some social sustainability issues and some environmental sustainability incorporations into our policy, we're kind of asking that we leave that for 2018 and revisit this in a more holistic way at that time. But in the short term, to do the interim administrative policies, we do feel that we need council to weigh in a little bit and give us some direction about what your expectations are so that we can do some tweaking to this to get it, at least get it back on an administrative footing that we can all live with and deal with and address. So I think that's pretty well. I'd like to go into a business process review to set goals and targets and to look at what kind of resourcing we need. Do we centralize, don't we, or do we stay decentralized? Some really broader questions are on the table. And obviously if we do get into centralizing, this centralized versus decentralizing, what would that mean? Because that would have substantial differences in how we approach the policies and the bylaws as well. So just not to make any assumptions that everybody understands the difference between decentralized and centralized purchasing. I think most of this group's pretty well aware of it, but decentralized obviously is where purchasing is truly delegated to managers. So it's either at council or council may direct and delegate it down to managers for specific dollar values. That is the current process we use. So instead of tasking a purchasing department to make sure that all the purchasing is done properly and meets all the consistent policy directions or meets the policy directions consistently, you actually portion that out, and every single manager in this organization is responsible for that. In a centralized... Oh, thank you. Apparently I'm bleeding to death. Thank you.
To death.
Am I all... Oh, and I'm wearing cream, so it's perfect. Thank you. I thought maybe there was some really important pivotal moment my CEO.
It is stopping.
But it's just a flesh wound, we're okay. Sorry for that, and thank you for that. So in a centralized system, the procurement is managed by a purchasing department. And when that happens, generally the purchaser and the CFO oversee to make sure that the contracts are in line with with corporate requirements and that they're sound under contract law and that there's some risk mitigation there. This is a pretty big decision though, and again, I'm not asking you to make it today. Getting a rough idea and talking about why aren't we tackling today as well, you can see there's quite a few arguments for going either way. And I think it's something we want to look at in a much more holistic way, in a business process review, see what we gain, what we lose, business case it a little bit. And so we'll probably be bringing back some of that discussion with you more as we go through budget, because on the downside of the centralized system, it requires more staff resources to actually pull that in and administratively deal with it on a centralized version. Even if we went centralized, realistically, there are 25 some odd businesses under this roof, and one purchasing agent is not going to be able to do it all. So we would still need a level of centralized, decentralized mix, and where is that magic mix? What is it that we pull out and do from a centralized perspective? The centralized, some of the upsides, you get bulk buying, and you can send someone out to negotiate on behalf of the entire corporation. So there's generally savings attributed to going centralized. Your training and policy enforcement is easier because everything's funneling through someone who has that expertise. They're trained in contract law and purchasing, and they're sort of making sure that we stay on the right side of things, particularly as dollar values get higher up. Issues are caught at the beginning of the process. It can't actually make it through the purchasing agent without making sure people have their budgets and their ducks in a row. They've gone through the proper processes. So that contract never actually leaves the building until that purchasing agent and that CFO have said that met our processes and we're good to go. It's reduced administration in theory for a lot of the senior staff, so they might have to put in a requisition, but they don't have to actually go through the bidding process, and that could be handled by another agent, by either in-house, or some of them actually contract that out right now, and so a major engineer or project engineer would do that for us on our major contracts. From a TTP perspective, our project, right now, one of the reasons we're not firing up some of our purchasing workflow and ability to manage those things without doing it very manually through our AP and catching at the end, is that we have no one to man the system. So it's actually its own module, and we have no administrative support to actually man that part of the functionality. And if that happens, my past experience with purchasing systems is that once it becomes unmanned, it becomes useless information. And the purchase orders stay open, and they don't get closed properly, and it just goes downhill from there. On the downside, we need more staffing, and of course the capacity to manage the size of this organization could potentially indicate or create a bottleneck if we don't. On the decentralized side, some of our managers who are very good and strong at contracting already have a lot of the expertise they need. They actually are pretty comfortable with having that direct accountability. And they find that they can work at their own pace. They're unfettered. There's no one kind of stopping them from moving ahead and getting their contracts put. And it is the current staffing, or the current setup, so it is staffed in theory, and we're kind of in it already, so it's a lesser of a change management issue. The downside of it, issues may or may not be caught, and if they're caught, they're usually caught at or at the end of the tender process. So we might have already put that contract on the street. We might already be into a situation where risk is higher through contract law, and now we're having to dig our way out of it. District-wide training required, so it's very hard to keep that many people up to speed on contract law and the do's and don'ts of purchasing. That can be very difficult for everybody. Usually the downside is we have to keep a lower delegated authority with council to keep some of those checks and balances still on staff in terms of making sure things happen. Often you'll see with organizations that have purchasing departments, council actually pulls themselves out of the contracting game. They don't know that they provide any more value than that purchasing agent or that person with the expertise would have, so they actually find a different way to look at whether it's a budget issue or if it's a capital approval process. So they look at different ways to look at that. So that's the downside is that the delegated authority goes lower, and sometimes that means more administrative work for both council and staff. And of course, distributed administration. So there's sometimes inconsistencies. Every department's having to find capacity to deal with purchasing. So as you can see, there's a lot of things to consider. As a quick and dirty, frankly, interim administration discussion, I'm not sure this is the place to make that decision. I think we do need to look at it more carefully with other members of our staff and weigh in more with council in terms of your vision and what you're looking to do as we grow. So I'm just gonna leave that there unless council has any overwhelming opinions today.
I've got a few hands.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to take them?
Sure, I can do that.
Ted?
Okay, thanks. When we had that meeting a while ago and talked about fair wage,
Living wage?
living wage, and I forget who that woman was that was in here and talked about them going through this same exercise and the savings that they found.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I don't know which way they went, but I assume they probably got someone to come in and help them with the, they didn't go to they went to the centralized system, I guess.
At least a partial centralized system
Yeah.
is how they went, and they did find savings. And to be frank, we would as well.
Yeah.
The minute you pull someone in who can do bulk purchasing and negotiate
Yeah.
broader contracts, even for just our supplies and materials and some of the business casing we'll bring back, we'll make some assumptions about that being even just a 5% and what change that would make on a savings year over year could help for sure.
Probably pay for the position.
Eventually, not in the year one, because of course we don't yet know what all the savings would be. So in year one, you have to eat hiring a position. That's these are all these, right?
But the savings is good, and then you have that equal wage thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Good. Patty, did I see your?
Yep. Yeah, just, I think there's a few things. I just want to talk about the timing issues with tenders. Part of it's our budget process. We approve a budget. Our managers go out and put tenders out, and they all come in June, July, and then sometimes they lag and we don't get to them and we get timing issues like the last two we just discussed. And I know last year when this happened, we talked about how do we make sure, and we did a pretty good job. I think the last meeting before we went on break, we had 3 or 4 different tender awards. So, we did a good job of sort of doing most of them. So I was a little surprised when all of a sudden, 2 days after the meeting, it was like, we have these ones. But I see the timing issue and the confusion with the SLRD and blah, blah, blah. So I understand those. So I guess one thing is, how do we make sure that our tendering aren't putting us up against that while we have this issue with the bylaw discretion? The other thing is, I'm open to marrying those, increasing that. I think our that amount is quite low, and things are just so much more expensive now, and it sort of limits staff's ability. But at the same time, I think while we still have this decentralized system, we have to have council's checks and balances to give the community confidence and council confidence that everything's going as planned. So just on that, I'm open to discussing upping that a little bit while we get something. But I really am interested in exploring the business case for decentralization and really centralization. You're going to have to forgive me
No
the
problem.
next 6 hours, that's all I'm going to say. So yeah, I'm really interested in that, understanding the business case, and coming back with some scenarios so we can really understand how that may, real life scenarios that maybe other municipalities have gone through, that have gone through this process. Because in my mind, I can totally see it being really beneficial, but it would be great to have the proof or some real ground.
Thank you, Karen. I'm not really interested in the decentralized model, and I really agree with a lot of the mayor's points. I think the policy sets the direction, and I agree with the increased amount. I think once you set the policy and the policy is accurate and reflects community values, then decentralizing puts the balances and checks in order to catch any discrepancies and ensure that everything is in. You may think you're within a policy, but having that check and balance to make sure that it's accurate and having it go through 2 different levels, I think is a better way to run a municipality, because it is often that things can actually get discombobulated away from aligning with policy. And the most important thing will be the 2018 upfront setting the policy to ensure that the purchasing policy matches and aligns with community values. You know, I think most of the things we purchase aren't really gonna be that controversial, but it just, and having that check and balance to centralize it will just ensure that the policy is followed and won't be as cumbersome as it actually seems.
So I've got two more hands, Christine. Do you have more information to present?
There's definitely more things to talk about. This
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
where we were gonna stop and focus. There's
Yeah.
several things, but I'm happy to hear this feedback, because
So
obviously
are
it'll
there
help us a
questions
lot.
about just what Christine's presented for? Because I think she's got more information about the specifics that she wants us to weigh in on.
You might get something.
Okay? Doug?
Oh, wait.
Okay? Jane? All right, let's keep going.
Okay, so with that in mind, that's one of the reasons that we'd like to take this into a more robust discussion after we get TTP up and live and actually have some of these business process discussions, both internally and then again with council in a more robust manner. So it's kind of starting at the top, which the bylaw obviously is the key document here. And so I thought if we could start at the top with the bylaw and some of the issues with that, and then work our way down, it helps us guide the policy, obviously, which should be the underlying document. So the Purchasing Authority Bylaw 1721, and I do apologize, I saw in the report that I referenced 1703 at some point. 1721 is the bylaw in question, we did attach it. This is how we have it broken down right now. I guess some of the key things that we'd like to explore a little bit more with you right out of the gates. I guess one of the key questions is, in the bylaw itself, we don't actually talk to how the appointed staff are determined. So for council's information, what we've done in the background is the appointed staff are assumed to be appointed by their manager. I have to sign off on it as a CFO that they have a need for that authority or delegation. And the paperwork expressly indicates that the manager is still fully accountable for any spending under that level. So that's what we're doing right now, okay? That level, though, is also taking into account any supervisory levels. So in somewhere like Public Works, where we actually have Suzanne and Scott and those people having fairly big crews and a lot of things going on, they're actually only limited to $2,000. So I would probably recommend that we add a layer in here for a supervisor, or that we, try to increase that level a little bit, because $2,000 doesn't go very far when you're working in a park or on a roads crew or something. So I'd point that out to you. Hopefully you're comfortable with how we're dealing with the appointments, though, because again, the bylaw is a bit silent. We should probably be a bit clearer about the fact that we are delegating when the bylaw says we're not allowed to delegate beyond this point, because essentially these managers are delegating that $2,000 level. So we'd like to fix that. I'd really like to explore the hierarchy with you. As we're doing the TTP projects, it's becoming, and we're trying to standardize workflows. So what this means is paperwork will actually be moved around electronically for signature. We're having to build workflows for respective areas, and we're trying to build some kind of consistent structure around them. We have a couple inconsistencies when we build that structure. For one, our fire chief currently is at a $10,000 level, but really he walks, talks, and acts like a director. He has emergency management and he has fire. And so that level kind of is weird that his manager has the same level as him. So I really encourage council to consider taking that up to the director level for the fire chief. And I would also like to revisit the senior director versus the GM position, because right now we don't have a senior director allotment in that breakdown. And he is part of our core leadership team. The rest of the core leadership team has the $50,000 level. He has several areas, reporting to him, and the escalation would be more consistent if we moved him to the $50,000 level in that case. The next thing is,
I wonder if we could get feedback on each one.
Sure.
Because some might not be controversial, we can just.
We've got a whole list
Not
of
forget
people.
one.
Can Christine just explain the 5, and then we can...
Sure.
so the other thing is, are these levels sufficient given growth and organization of the organization and the activity levels that we're now experiencing? And I think that some of the members of the table already discussed the fact that they would be open to looking at that. The key here is that it does allow us to be more nimble. We can award contracts faster and get jobs going. If we have to stop and do administration and bring it into council for an award and take it back out, obviously there's usually a minimum of 2 to 2.5 weeks right out of the gates that we're delaying every contract that goes out. So sometimes in the interest of being quicker and faster to get onto projects, there is good argument for it. I did go out and just do some very preliminary research. Obviously we would want to do more, but to see what some of the other municipalities are doing. Whistler, for instance, is at a $1 million level before it goes out to council. Now, I need to talk to Ken and see what they do in behind the scenes to make sure that's comfortable, because I think that's probably a bit high for us right now if we stay decentralized. Courtney, who actually has a purchasing agent, they have levels that actually don't ever come back to council. So many of the centralized organizations that I'm seeing don't go to council for awards. They find other ways. And I know when we were in Metro Vancouver, we used to use a capital approval award. So you awarded it before the tender was put. They talked about what would be awarded or what would be tendered and contracted. Council gave their blessing to that, and then it went through the proper purchasing channels to make sure it was done properly. And in those cases, it usually comes back to council if it's going to exceed budget, or if someone's looking to sole source. So those key things where it's not staff's call to make those risk evaluations and decisions. Some of the other departments I came across, New Westminster has about a $500,000 level before it comes back. So I'm just kicking these out. I have no investment in any of these levels other than to suggest that we might want to revisit it. Now we are getting to be a 20,000 municipality and we have a lot of activity going on. It's probably a little bit low in relation to the amount of work that's being put out the door.
Is New West centralized or decentralized?
I have to research that further. I couldn't tell quite from their policy, but I believe they probably have a purchasing group in there as well. And that would be my overriding message to you as the CFO. Don't take it too high while you're still decentralized. I do agree that that doesn't make a lot of sense. Having said that, I think you might want to look at some levels where we're getting pretty small, and particularly around our capital managers and things like that. It's pretty hard for them to deal with the $10,000 restrictions. Some change orders can be fairly significant. The purchasing policy indicates that the CAO and CFO can award tender greater than $50,000. But as you can see, our policy says that we can award that. The CAO alone can award up to $100,000, so that's obviously an inconsistency. The bylaw itself is silent on any exception. They don't say in August we have a different rule. The bylaw says that we have $100,000 and $50,000 respectively. So I need to find out from council how you'd like me to amend that. Am I amending the bylaw to allow for an exception in August, or are we amending the policy to say that's not on, we don't do that? And in which case, what do we do when something like August and a timing issue comes up? Are we expected to come back to council and try to telephone or do some kind of council meeting over something like an ice machine? Is that, council's wishes? So that's an area we would like to explore a little bit more on the bylaw itself. I don't know if you want to chew those over for a bit, or?
All right, so maybe, council, we can go through them one by one, based on what's up there. So I've got Peter, Doug, Jason, Susan, Ted.
And Councillor Elliott, I do apologize, I missed item 4.
Oh,
Well, you kind of hinted at it.
I kind of hinted at it. So the only thing here would be, and I put it in the report, what do you see as your role in the award process? Because that will dictate whether we should be going award or whether we need to see you before award, right? Or before the contracts and tenders even put out. And again, I think that changes whether you go centralized or decentralized. So right now assume decentralized, and if you can give us some feedback on that, that also helps indicate timing and the value that you would want to be involved.
okay. So on how appointed staff are determined, comments? Doug?
Yeah, it's going to be hard for me to actually break it down in there, but I had a couple of thoughts about this because I generally agree that some of the levels are low and could be raised. And I think some of the suggestions you made I would agree with, treating the senior director and the fire chief, for example, at the same level as general managers, just given the nature of their jobs. One thing I didn't see in this, which I've seen in some of the bids that have come before council and the approval of contracts, et cetera, is some of these things seem to be evaluated by committee, the staff committee, and we end up with a matrix. And I didn't see anything anywhere that sort of sets up that process. Because when I was thinking about it, I thought, well, you know, some things really maybe don't have to come back to us. You know, we budget for it, so we created that number. And so, as you said, it would come back to us if it was over budget, clearly. Sole source, obviously the threshold is very low, and we'd want to see it if it was anything significant. But when you look at, you know, a $500,000 sewer pipe contract or something like that, these things are typically looked at by a staff committee, it seems, and we get a recommendation. And so, for me, I think there could be different levels for different types of things, and something like that, a single thing as opposed to a repeating contract, for example, if there is some structure, some staff committee structure, and there is some matrix criteria overseen by the general manager, then for my part, my threshold is fairly high, and it's multiple bid, it's gone through the normal process. Then my threshold could be fairly high. If it's just kind of one person that's saying, here's the recommendation, then maybe it's a little bit lower. So you might think about something around that, and for different types of purchases. If it's an ongoing contract, you know, a 2-year supply of something or other, and we're locked in for 2 years, maybe the threshold's a little lower. Maybe we do want to chime in on that and have because now we're kind of committing off into the future. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Jason.
I was kind of going to go where Doug was going, so any to add anything else?
Nothing on any of the other ones up there?
I guess just to, because I haven't spoken to it yet, is yeah, raising those thresholds. I think that's good, and moving towards a centralized system, definitely a good thing.
Susan, go ahead.
Thank you. The council competitive procurement, I want to also say that I really, your report is excellent. I really think you laid out everything really well in here. Council's role, I think, I just remember the solicitation by suppliers to council. When you are at a meeting or somebody approaches you, generally it's to be given something. I would never think about spending money unless it had gone through the entire council. But I think last term it was that Shaw had offered to build us some bus shelters, or just give us a grant to build 5 bus shelters. And because we didn't have it in our purchasing policy to be offered grants to do something, we couldn't accept funding to have, it was basically a grant. So I'm not sure where that falls into. It's not procurement, it's granting. I'm not sure where it's procurement of bus stops, I guess. But that didn't fall anywhere under the purchasing policy. So it would have to go through council, I imagine. But I'm not sure how that would be amended in our current policy, and it's been years and we've asked for it to be amended because we did lose out on money and opportunity for community goodness just because it wasn't in our purchasing policy. So I do see a place where council can come forward and say, we'd like to accept this granting money from whatever company is offering, but I'm not sure how that fits into our purchasing policy. And it was because of our old purchasing policy. We asked for it to be amended and it never came back over some years. So I would like to see that addressed in the purchasing policy. Other than that, I do still think that even if we have high level of directors making decisions and that they're able to make decisions, it needs to be vetted. Because even if you are totally trusting of all your directors, you can still have things go off the rail, and I think we need balance and check. And I think that, as Doug said, that if there's policy in place or a matrix or however that is set up, that if everything meets the criteria, then it still is double checked by a centralized process. Not necessarily coming to council, but having a check and balance within our administration.
Thank you. Patty?
So I'll just go through this list up here, and maybe I'll add on to what Susan was saying about the policy on receiving revenues. I would love to see what you guys think. Like, I'm totally open to how you the CFO and the CAO and the senior management team determine. I'm less fussed about senior director, junior director, the titles. I'm less fussed about that, and I'd just like to understand what you guys think would be a good number to go with the decentralized system.
Yes.
I think we should be working towards and really putting the business case together to move towards centralized system, but in the meantime, totally happy with what you bring back and bring back a suggestion. I'm happy to go, yeah, I think that's pretty nice. And I think that sort of addresses number 2 as well. I'm not really, I don't care about management structure. I think it needs to be, some senior managers might have quite a bit larger, some not so much. Council's role in procurement, and I'm happy to raise the amount. I think council's role in procurement, it's not just, yeah, we will see it and we sort of rubber stamp a staff decision. It is about public openness and making sure the public understands. So we need some system to make sure that's open, transparent, clear with the public, that we are doing our due diligence in the tendering process and we've made a decision based on strong foundations. So from council's role, I'm happy to raise that significantly. It may be worthwhile just going through and saying, we have 20 things that are above $250,000. And those 20 things come to council. It might be 10 things, it might be 5 things, I don't know. But and then all the other ones don't. And we have that, and we're doing it more now that we're having the pre-tender debrief on it. And I think that's really good, and that's good for the public and good for council to understand that that's coming. And then at that point, we basically say, yep, should they come in under, whatever our policy says, should they come in under budget? It's issued. It's almost like a pre-issue. I don't know if we can do that legally, but you know what I mean. It's not a pre-issue. It's not a pre-issue. With regard to, and I'm happy to put in exceptions for August, maybe with just the qualifying acting mayor, viewing it, and council can come up with some criteria. Is it a timing issue? Is it a whatever? Council can come up with criteria, the acting mayor, whoever is around, can base that. So I'm happy to create that language. Maybe this question might go for Robin with regard to what Susan was saying. I mean, if it was a policy issue that we couldn't accept grants for someone to put towards bus shelters, can't council override a policy? If it's a bylaw, that's a different thing. Was it a bylaw or a policy? And if it's a policy, at any time, council should be able to go, we understand the policy's there, there's an opportunity, we're going to override our policy in this circumstance.
Council can always override a policy, as long as we're not impacting the bylaw that's over
It doesn't
top of
contradict
it.
the bylaw, yeah.
Right, and there may be some other legal issues around commitments or authorities to make commitments under whatever the grant language is. So, because all the grants are different, and so we would have to take a peek at how the grants themselves are written and what authorities it needs to go to.
And I'm happy to put some just easy language in the policy saying, when opportunities arise, we will consider them. Like, just simple. But council at any time can override a policy, we just can't override a bylaw.
Any questions?
Well, I've had 2 different councillors go down the path of solicitation, and I'm wondering if maybe I'm misunderstanding the scenarios. I'm going to let you know what I'm concerned about as the CFO. I'm concerned when suppliers come in and solicit here or with our staff to do work that we haven't envisioned doing yet. And what I would say to you is, by all means, hear the opportunity, but still make them go through a process. Turn around, put an RFP on the street, and if anybody wanted to bring you that opportunity, they could, because then you're still competitive bidding.
Yeah. No,
And that's my concern, is that people think that it's okay to come in and solicit our staff because I'll get you this grant, but then I want to do the consulting work, and I'm going to write my name right into it. Or they come into this table and they say, have I got a deal for you, council? That's actually what I'd like to shut down and say, we shouldn't have that opportunity because you're going to get more and more suppliers at your table doing that. And that's really, in my opinion, goes against the concept of competitive bidding. And really, by all means, take the idea, council. I'm not suggesting you don't have the idea, that someone doesn't bring
Or
you that
staff
great
have the
idea,
idea.
or wherever else. But then turn around and do the process that puts you on the right side of that idea. That's what I'm asking for in the policy.
I think that's what we're.
That's exactly.
Okay, good.
Did you have some?
Yeah, I just, I remembered about, we didn't have a P3 process as well. So procurement where you actually had purchasing where it was a public-private partnership and how that was written into our policy as well. I'm interested in having that looked at as well because I think government, public-private partnerships have to be also written into that policy.
Okay.
And we have done a little bit of that, like the new bus
Yes.
shelters are an example of that.
Exactly, but larger like buildings and it's a like multi-million-dollar procurement. If we're looking at buildings being a B3, like a public-private partnership in buildings or in water, in any of the things that could come up in the future, it's good to be proactive and to think about, you know, I think about Brendan Park being a P3 project, and because of the lack of policy, it's never really been explored.
So I'll just clarify, we actually do allow for P3 under the long-range planning policies. We do consider it. I do want to put a caveat on it. There are actually limited opportunities for solid P3s. The provincial government actually used to
Yes.
have a department. They used to actually vet this, and I can't remember the number they told me of the ones that actually made the smell test and made it to a P3, but it was really small. So I don't think we should assume that because of what our purchasing policy says that staff wouldn't consider where a P3 makes sense. We would still bring that forward. I don't think there's anything in our policy that prevents us from doing that
I'm just
currently.
bringing it
Yeah.
up because I want to make sure that there's nothing in our policy is old. I don't think they thought about P3s in the old policy.
Yeah.
So I'm just, if there is something that needs to be written in to ensure that we can explore P3s, I would like to make sure that it is in our policy.
And if I may, just add to that, and P3s also have to go through an AAP process as well. So true, over a certain threshold.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Peter, you want to?
Yeah, just some generalizations. I'm in favor also of the centralized. I think it's, there's a lot of money to be saved. I'm sure it will come through in the wash eventually. The levels, the idea of raising the levels, especially for people like the fire chief, et cetera, I think it's a great idea. The ceiling on the procurement, Patty mentioned like 250,000, and I was kind of harking me back thinking about how we bandied around the trails machine for 2 budgets there, back and forth. So there, I think there's certain cases that sort of come through and make it, and others that don't. But I think that it deserves to come before council at a certain level. I don't exactly know where that is. I'm looking forward to seeing the business case for this and seeing how it works itself out. That's kind of it for now.
Thanks, Peter. Dr. Ted?
Yeah, thanks. Just to Councilor Chappelle's point, one of the things we might do is define what the purchasing policy or purchasing bylaw applies to. And for example, I'm not sure it would apply to a partnership at all, because we're not purchasing anything, we're kind of joining somebody on some project. And so I'm not sure that that's quite what the whole policy is all about at all. So I think, you know, we want to be clear about that. And if these other things are not part of the policy, then we can just go and deal with them as we see fit.
You got Ted, and then Patty, if you decide.
Okay, thanks. I like the idea of your report coming to us, because I think you're the one that knows what we really need. No matter what we do it still would be nice to see in a report, even if it's after the fact, when it contacts me, that at least we get that in the next council meeting as this sewer line was given to this. I can't remember the whole time I'm here where we've ever gone against one purchasing. You know, I can't remember ever saying, oh, no, we don't want that group, we want this group. So, I think you're shaking your head. but I
Ron
think-
Sanders always did it.
Okay?
When Ron Sanders was on council, we did, we reviewed them.
We reviewed them?
Yeah, and we said no to some.
But anyway, but as long as we get a little blip at the end afterwards, that's, because I don't know who said it, I mean, it's us showing the public that we're paying attention. Anyway, that all sounds good.
Did you want to add a comment?
No, maybe, no. I did, and then he got wrong.
Blame it on.
All right, so I'll just.
Oh, I did.
Yep, go.
We did have an issue, I wasn't overly happy with in the last month or so, when we sole sourced something. And I think we need some clarity on what really is a justification for a sole source. Just because they've done work for us in the past in the realm is not a reason. So I think we need some really clear guidance for, because it's not the only time it's happened, and in my opinion, it came to us as a sole source. I won't mention the item, but it was definitely, didn't meet the sniff test, as you said.
And I just want to say I was super proud of council for calling them on.
We're learning.
But yeah, I mean, there are reasons for sole sourcing, absolutely, and there are good reasons, and generally it can be cost, it can be a better cost savings for the public to do that, where there's definite knowledge, but absolutely, I agree, there needs to be some very clear justification for sole sourcing.
If there's definite knowledge, they'll probably get the tender anyway in a proper bid situation, so.
So I'll just add my 2 cents in the interest of time. Do you have more to present?
I do, I'm sorry. That was just the bylaw,
Well, that's just the bylaw. Okay, so I think we do need language about how appointed staff are determined. I think that's really important, and I'd like to know that, because we don't want to get too decentralized. So, trying to pull that in. I think language around sole sourcing, and also, I don't mind exceptions in August, but like Patty said, it has to reach a bar that it's about time it provides a benefit to the community. It's not just because I want
Because we missed the
it faster.
deadline.
Yeah, and my report didn't get into the agenda. I think for me, things like our water, sewer, roads, that kind of stuff, I think there's probably a pretty high bar for that, that the council doesn't need to see. But things that have to do with the public realm, so I think about like the streetscape for Cleveland Avenue along Junction Park. That to me is like a pre-tender thing. The council would want to weigh in about what we see included in there, or active transportation projects that we're going out to tender, where it impacts the health of the community, the look of the community. Then I think I would prefer to actually touch that before it goes out to tender, rather than just approving it as a tender document. That's where I see our value. Because once it's budgeted, it's there, and then we've got the checks and balances of we can't be over budget, we don't sole source it, we put a competitive bid. I like Councilor Race's comments about if it's a committee deciding, maybe the threshold's higher, but if it's one person, maybe the threshold is lower. That seems to make sense to me. But I generally see council's role and make sure we've got a solid budget. There's solid reporting so that we're managing our risk. So we see at the end of every year how much money we've given to each contractor, over 25,000. That report could be better in my mind. So like, these are capital projects, and here's how much so-and-so won this year, and so that we can see whether the contracts are all going to one provider or not. Because right now we just kind of get an alphabetized list, but it doesn't break it down in terms of, consulting engineering and capital projects. So I think that report can be better. So to me, it's about whatever we move in terms of thresholds, we've got to make sure there's reporting that gives council comfort that while we're in this decentralized system, that we're managing our risk. Those would be my thoughts.
And I had a couple people, mention this, and it's a really good point, is there are opportunities also to bring back to Finance and Audit Committee major awards over X dollar value too, right? That's still under your threshold, but that bring back reporting and let you know those things. So we can report back after the fact, and a couple people alluded to that, and absolutely that can be quite standard. And the other thing is that concept of capital approval beforehand. So if we are raising past a certain level, even once we centralize, we would still potentially come back for capital approvals prior to award, right? Or prior to the tender even being created for some of those pre-design issues that you're talking about.
Thanks. Okay, we're a little bit behind schedule, so I kind of wanted to see what else Christine has to present.
Yeah, so I'll try and hop on this fairly quickly because a lot of the stuff after this does get much more administrative, and it is around the purchasing policy aspect of this, and that's where a couple of your other things that got brought out on the table I think you've probably already addressed, so hopefully we'll get through them pretty quickly. I just want to update some of the items, obviously for concurrence, both with bylaw 1721 as we choose to amend it, and then also with treaties. So the new treaty now is the NWPTA, or New West Partnership Treaty Agreement, or Trading Agreement. And for instance, in our policy it quotes only 2 provinces, but there's now 3 provinces involved in that and a few things like that. So just cleaning up some of that. Accountability clarification. There are several scenarios. Actually, I've got some slides on it, so I'll carry on. And then efficiency, some of the things around bonding levels and when we decide to go to public invitations that we probably should revisit from a purely administrative, whether it makes sense to put that kind of time in if it's not required. So just very quickly, Council had asked before by resolution that we move from $2,000 to $4,000 for quotes, previous motion, so we would incorporate that in and we would clean up the language around the New West Partnership Trade Agreement. And same with 7.3 and 14.4, we'd start aligning it with the bylaws. 7.6, emergency expenditure levels. This is one we need to explore just a little bit more, and I think we're hearing that we need some key criteria, even in August or outside if there was an emergency situation where we might not have the opportunity to pull council in for a council meeting prior to an award in an emergency type event. So we'd probably want some understanding of what the exceptions are before you expect to be called in or telephone conferenced in to do something like that. CFO signature on the purchase order. So this is centralized versus decentralized. If we're going decentralized and we're saying the manager is responsible, and in fact, policy says that not only is the manager responsible, but the manager can sign it, or if it went to council, it has to be Robin or the mayor sign it. Having me sign the purchase order after the fact has no value, folks. I mean, basically a purchase order is the contract, and really the only reason we also issue a purchase order if we've issued the contract is to put a number on it so that we can work it through a system and reference a number. So to me, it just clouds who's accountable for what's happening. Because I have no accountability at that point. I didn't go through the manager has run the tender process. They've got their committee, and just to provide you all assurance, we actually have an addendum for consulting. We have a grid. It's a little convoluted. It probably should be removed and made something more useful and simple, but we do have grids, and generally all of our major contracts, our staff do get together and do matrices and grids. And by all means, if you wanted some more information about that in the report, we can talk to that a little bit more just to clarify those processes for you when you're going to award a big contract. The supplier has to have a proven track record, and again, someone alluded to this in the meeting, and wholeheartedly agree. I think the language in our policy right now gives the impression that we'll only look at people who have worked for us before. That flies in the face of competitive bidding. We will look at any supplier. However, we probably want to word this to say, however, if you've screwed up for us in the past, we will take that into consideration, right? So just reframing and rewording that. And then we have had feedback over the years about the bonding levels, so I'd like to take that back and work with engineering a little bit more. If your bonding levels are too low, it actually increases the cost of the contract because, of course, it costs them to put bonding in place. And so there's probably other ways we can tackle that. Things like, for instance, if it's a contract under $50,000, we're not going to pay you till it's done and we're happy it's done, or we're going to have a holdback process or something like that can be built into the contracts so that we don't actually have to require bonding for lower dollar contracts. So we'd like to review some of that and just make sure that it's not being really difficult. So those are kind of the key policy ones, mostly administrative, but if there's anything that twigged thought process.
Council, any agreements, disagreements, questions? Susan, you had a hand up, and
I am actually,
Good.
yeah, everything's been best. Thank you, Kristen.
Yeah, thank you. So one of them you just touched on, which was the proven track record, which relates to one that wasn't mentioned, which was, I read the purchase contract for the first time in a long time, actually, as part of this report. And it has in paragraph 4.3, local preference.
Yes. Good
We
point.
had a discussion about that in my first term on council, about whether or not we should be favoring local contractors. And we came away from that discussion saying, no, we should not, because our duty is not to the local contractor, it's to our taxpayer to get the best value for the tax dollar. And when you start favoring one, you start not favoring and not encouraging other competitive bids. So I think we want to be very clear that there is no such preference. I mean, the reality is a local contractor has kind of an inside position anyway because of mobilization costs. Coming from somewhere else to bring your machinery and all that kind of stuff is a cost to anybody else that wants to bid. But beyond that, to be quite clear that we will not favor it. Because that's caught people in the past. And then part of that then is they have to have a prior performance record with the district. Is almost the same thing. So I think the two of them
Need to be.
probably taken out.
And to the point, thank you. I did miss it in my report, but it is a very good catch, and I have had concerns about it. There are ways, if you do want some kind of local thing, there are ways to approach it from a green policy perspective, and so I'd like to take it out now and revisit it as part of the environmental and social, because you can address probably a lot of what we're trying to get to is we don't want ground transportation for miles to get to a job and carbon and blah, blah, blah. There's other ways to approach that. But absolutely, I agree, local preference flies in the face of competitive bidding, and it flies in the face of most of our treaties that say that we will allow open process.
Thanks. Patty?
Yeah, just as it's articulated, it doesn't work, as Doug says. But I think there's a way of putting wording in there that allows us to put that lens on it, should it be applicable. So, just a question about, I agree with all this stuff generally. Was this S11.7, 12.5, was that some way of trying to have a double check on something? Or, like, I'm just trying to understand why it was put there in the first place.
I think probably, you'll often see the CFO sign off on anything coming through their purchasing agent. So if I were putting an agreement on the street, or you see the CFO involved in the actual contract putting for the purchase itself. So my thought process here is that if you want to get me involved, you need to get me involved sooner before you award the contract. So maybe I sign off on something before you guys sign it, or something like that. That might be a useful reason.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, so having said that, capacity is pretty tight in finance just at the moment. I'm not looking for more roles just at the moment. If it's decentralized, that actually, I hate to say, works for me just at the moment. But definitely going forward with centralized policy, you would see this more and more where actually the CFO is signing off as contracts go up or part of the delegation authority level.
That's that,
Yeah.
my second part of the question.
Anything else? I'm okay with the changes you recommend.
Okay. So just a couple of other issues that again, one of this is administration. I just need to look at the policy. There's nothing in there that indicates they need to keep information about their tender awards and things, so that would be an admin cleanup. And exceeding contracts or authority. This one just requires just a little more discussion. There is really nothing that I can find in the purchasing policy right now that is definitively clear about what you do about change orders, or what we do when we have a scenario of maybe a consultant that we bring in for a specialized purpose and they stay working with us for some time. And although we initially contracted them and we think they fall within the limits, as time goes on and the contract continues, like, you can envision certain scenarios, it's starting to get close to where it should have been awarded by council. And what process would council like us to do to clean those types of things up and make sure we're on the right side of it? What do you want us to do with change orders? What is the tolerance level council's prepared to go over a purchase order before it has to come back to this table and a change order be officially reapproved? So I do need to put that on the table. That's a fairly important one. We touched on supplier solicitation, so if everyone's relatively comfortable with what we talked about there, I won't beat a dead horse. And then the other is, none of our policies talk about those things where, which frankly I'm signing off on right now, CRA payroll, commodity taxes, things like that. There's no formal purchasing process that's happened, but by the same token, other than the check signing by the mayor and myself, somebody needs to sign off on that payment being made in the first place and that contract. And they're gray areas because big utilities obviously are project engineer is going to set up a utility when they set up a new lift station or a new whatever, and those aren't really conducive or practical to bringing back to council for those things, but obviously over time they're going to creep up and go over contracts. They're not the formal. I'd like to just talk about some of those exclusions in the policies and stuff, because right now, to be frank, we are dealing with them practically, and literally I look at them and I go, yeah, that makes sense, and I'm signing. I'm good. I'd love a little more feedback on the exceeding contract piece.
Okay, I'm gonna try these. John?
Thank you. And I noticed that in the report, but I mean, something, for example, CRA, let me step backwards. I think the advantage of going to the CFO is just a check to make sure we have the money, which might sound trite, but you know, funding is in place, the loan bylaws have been got to a certain point, etc. And you're right, that has to happen before we enter into the contract. And so it's kind of, that to me would be, if there's going to be your participation at all, perhaps maybe just above a certain threshold, it would be, from my perspective, it would be for that purpose, to make sure the funding is in place, meets budget, etc. The other thing is with respect to things like CRA. I mean, I looked at that and I thought, holy smokes, what do we? There's no discretion. You know, it's a matter of law. We have to make the payment. So it's not any kind of process. We're not going out and seeing if there's some alternative to CRA to pay our money to. That's it. And there's a number of things like that. Utility bills is another thing in my mind. If we're using power, we're going to pay hydro. There's no two ways about it. So really things like that where there really is no discretion, there is no choice, if you like, because the choice is the thing that we're really kind of checks and balancing on. Then from my perspective, we don't have to say anything like that, and maybe not you either, except make sure we have the money, we're not going over budget. We have a report periodically like we just had at the top of the agenda. So those types of things, very high threshold for that.
Yeah, generally agree with what Doug said for that. With regard to the protocol for contract change orders or exceeding contracts, something that I always worry about, and I think council is on the same page, is scope creep on some of these things without the due diligence of it going through the public process and going through council. So if we actually sort of increase our delegated authority, I'm of the mind that any change order comes back to council. Like if we actually increase the delegated authority, that's great. But if we have change orders or budget, anything like that has to come back to council. Because I've seen it happen. And as you know, I've seen it happen where the project is broken out into phases, so the phases are under the delegated authority, but the overall project's way above the delegated authority. So I think we need clarity on that stuff. But if there are change orders or if there's a scope change on a project and it exceeds any delegated authority, it comes back to council.
So I need to clarify a couple things. The change order itself, the contract by its nature, is probably over council authority already and was awarded, and then the change order comes. Is there any tolerance for the change order, and how would you like to deal with that? So one of the concerns we would have is if we're going up to tender and we tender for a certain price, in the back of our minds, we probably have a contingency in there because change orders happen, right?
Yeah.
So we probably need to somehow communicate that to you without communicating that to the awarded person, right? So that's one of the kind of tricks of that. The other thing is that generally systems will allow some level of tolerance over purchase order level. We're trying to figure out what that is on our TTP process. We have to choose between percent or dollar value. And frankly, that's hard. Usually you would get an option of both, the lesser of or the higher of, percent or dollar value. We're actually gonna have to choose. So I do think we do need a bit of tolerance to be able to just manage from a practical perspective day to day. But I agree that change orders of a certain magnitude do need to come back here. And for clarification, do you mean once it gets over the award, all change orders come back? Or do you mean for the value of the change order?
Sorry, I should clarify. If it exceeds the budget, obviously, and if it exceeds delegated authority. If there's minor change orders, I understand that change orders happen within a project. And I think we all expect our staff to be looking for scope creep all the time with these projects. But yeah, really those two things. So yeah, normal change orders, I understand they happen, and we don't want to be overly bureaucratic. I agree.
I'm sorry, I'm still a little bit thick on this one. So if I had a $200,000 contract that had originally come to this table, and I want to put a $60,000 change order on that, does that come back to this table? Because $60,000 in theory is within within staff's authority, right? Or are we looking at the contract being $260,000 and we need to come back here?
If let's say our delegated authority is for $200,000, it comes in at 196. You guys make the decision. If the change order comes back with $60,000 more,
We're back in.
that you're back because it exceeds your delegated authority. It's not the
Contract
change order; it's the project.
That's what I was just checking
That's
for. Yeah.
what I was trying to say.
Any other councillors want to comment on that? No, okay.
But I may build in a small tolerance for,
I-
is that fair?
In my mind, that's fair, because change happens, and I would assume that all of our capital project managers are building in contingency into their projects, and I've heard Matt say that before, that there's contingency into projects. So I would expect that that's part of budgeting and part of our tender process. It's practice. I'm not sure how you get to the policy, because you don't want people bidding and there's this much
Extra.
sitting there.
Yeah, I have a tolerance for some small changes, because I think one of the things, just looking at the experience we've had in the last couple of years, we don't want to do stifle some of the initiative that staff have shown on some of these projects where everybody's there, all of a sudden something happens and there's an opportunity to do a little bit extra. And this is the most efficient way to do it, as opposed to just demobilize, come back a year later and try and do it. And so I'd like to give staff a little bit of flexibility for initiative and things like that. How you define it, I don't know, within a certain percentage of the total contract price or something like that. I'll just leave it to you to come up with suggestions, but I tend to agree with the mayor that, above a certain amount, changes can take you quite a ways away from where you were originally going. So we do have to have a check on it, absolutely.
All right. Anything else, Kristen?
So from here, I'll take that discussion away. I'm going to do my best after 3 weeks of vacation to try and remember what we all talked about and come back.
You can watch the tape.
I will watch the tape and try and bring you back a drafted bylaw revision and a drafted policy revision. Do you want it to come back here for further edit review
Before our first reading?
before it goes out for readings?
Yeah, I think
Yeah, I think so.
so. Yeah. There's probably enough changes on there that we should take them in.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much. Who is doing the Denville Park timeline update?
Asia.
Hi.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So that's our next agenda.
Okay, so just a brief update. We've just started, we're in the middle of doing some public input based on questionnaires and surveys to begin park design, playground design this fall. We're going to do that in-house as much as possible. We've got, fortunately, have that resource, which will make the budget go a little further. So, survey's out. It was out August 15th. It's out until the middle of this month. It's hand-delivered to all Dentville residents, including Wilson Crescent. We've got 207 responses today. So.
Wow,
Yeah.
fantastic.
It's really around two main questions, one of which is top 3 pieces of equipment we'd like to see in there, and then budget allowing what sort of comes after those 3. So top 3 and then subsequently thereafter. We've also had 2 engagement events, open house format. Those were not so well attended, about half a dozen to 10 people at each event.
Hard in the summer.
I'm sorry?
Hard in the summer.
Yes, what we're finding is that there really isn't a good time to do public engagement.
In the summer.
Everyone's super busy, and we've got a lot of engagement going on a number of fronts. So as of September 15th, we should have some based on 207 responses, some fairly detailed and deep information that we can then sort of put together in terms of, well, this is what the budget will get you, these are the next things, this is likely a preliminary design, and then move from that point.
Any questions? Tim?
I never saw a map with the location.
Did we ask about location? I think there was some, it's on the sideways, sort of on the side. There aren't a lot of options in Dentville.
There is options.
Not a lot of good options, no. But we just don't have a lot of land that's readily available to put a
I
park
just
on.
thought we'd see kind of a map.
So that will come back to us
Yeah.
after the surveys have been consolidated, a more fulsome report is coming back in September, later this month.
We can certainly bring you that update as to where we're at. I mean, the location at present is that one next to the Newport Strata project. So.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Oh, and really want.
Does you mention?
Yeah, it's not going to get it. The one we did last year, was the year before. Wilson. Willow. There were obviously a few neighborhood advocates and champions that kind of got the neighborhood out to some of the events in the park area. They had a park area to meet at, and they had 2 or 3 really keen parents in the area who were champions. Have we been able to find similar type champions, or solicit, or try to get I don't know, even if it's people we know saying, hey, can... I think it really is helpful when you have those neighborhood champions out there advocating with the neighbors and generating that conversation with the neighborhood. They kind of did our job for us in that scenario, which is great because they'll do it well. You know what I mean? Not to say we won't, but so I'm just wondering if there's a way you get those community champions, then you get more than 6 people at a public meeting.
I haven't been involved directly in any of the engagement to know if there are a small group that are more involved than others, but I will find that out.
Yeah. And even if it's 6 people who showed up, maybe there's a way of teasing out some of that leadership.
Yeah.
In that group.
I do have a comment. I'm just wondering, I agree with most of the comments that I made. I think it's amazing to decide on park equipment and to just have the people that are using the equipment decide on it, but I'm not sure it meets participatory budget. I don't think it's participatory budget deciding on park equipment, even though it is spending money. It's not deciding between 2 different, do you want a park or do you want something else? It's deciding on a few pieces of equipment. But I'm interested in seeing the next public engagement strategy on engagement. I don't know if deciding on, the definition of participatory, by the definition, it actually meets the criteria for that. But a really good public engagement aspect nonetheless of the park.
That might segue into the next.
And exactly, we'll move into the next one. I hope to see participatory park.
So Gary, that, you said that the survey closes in the middle of this month,
Yes.
and then we would see something.
Yeah, we'll perhaps assemble a summary, an engagement summary, and sort of next steps from that point.
And to Councillor Schwell's point, it's just, we've given budget to the community to decide how to spend it, so it'd be interesting just to carry that through.
Yes.
Okay.
Because we're taking baby steps. Jason?
So I'm just wondering if you could refresh my memory. So on this park, so we're not exploring acquisition of land for this park?
At this point in time, no.
Because I was under the impression that that was one of the few things that we, in a big DCC type of scenario, can actually do, is actually purchase land for parks. So I'm just wondering if staff had contemplated that, or if that's going to make it way more complicated.
That would make it more complicated, and to date, no, we haven't
Yeah.
focused on that one parcel of Carson and Buckley.
Okay.
Do you want to see more information about that when they bring it back, or just, is it even an option?
If we, not a DCC project, but the parks, there is a cash in lieu of parks reserve that we can use for land acquisition. So same idea, different fund, but if, perhaps what it, perhaps, I'm sorry?
I don't think it'll go very far right now. It's probably not huge.
Perhaps if we have the summary of what the park should be, at that point we can make a decision as to where we've selected is the right one, and if there is a better location, we can simply move that concept to a different location.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, because we were doing some other explorations of some of our lands there and what to do with them and how to work that all out, and just to make sure that we,
We're trying to work
Seize
both
that,
ideas
yeah.
at the same
Okay.
time.
I've got 10 people.
Yeah, that's, I just want to make sure we're keeping all options open on the location.
We are.
That's good. Thank you.
Okay, Peter?
And with respect to the park, and to Patty's point about having a community champion like we had at the Willow Park, perhaps looking through some of the comments that you have, some of the more prevalent ones or the more pointed ones, or whoever seemed to really step up, maybe somebody we could make a subtle hint to, say, you know, would you be willing on the ground to put some boots on and march the neighborhood and help to rally? Because she's right, it was extremely effective, as we saw. And they're, you know, they're well known to their neighbors. They're the recognizable face of it. So if you can attach somebody like that to the project, it sort of really helps to move it along.
Sure.
Throw someone under the bus.
Yeah, just want to explore what Jason was talking about with the DCC. So we collect DCCs to go to park purchase. Do we have any idea of what is in that pot of money?
You know, I'm going to throw out a number off the top, but I can go to my desk there and figure it out for you and give you an exact, but I think it was in the $300,000 range the last time I looked.
And do we have a strategy for that?
Currently, no, but I think it's part of what they're considering as they do the real estate and
Okay, that's
strategy.
what I
They
wanted
are
to make
taking
sure that
into
that was
consideration.
part of the real
Yes.
estate strategy. And, I mean, we own, obviously, around where the youth center is and skate park and all that forested area. And we are looking at affordable housing opportunity in that area, correct? We also own the buffer between, at the north end of Denville. So it may be worth putting out to the community location, like maybe there's a partnership opportunity to put it on school district plans. I don't know. Or maybe we explore, and I don't understand why we couldn't use DCCs as long as it fit in with our strategy. Like, that's why we have DCCs.
Yes, and so through the chair, the DCCs has a number of DCC park projects that can only be used for those, and I don't think this is one of those projects.
So we would have to amend the bylaw if we wanted to include it.
Correct, yes. what's that road at the north end? That buffer area is unfortunately constrained by a number of conservation easements, so that's tricky to develop. Trickier, quite a bunch trickier than other lands. Doesn't mean we can't, it's just it's trickier to deal with.
Ted?
I think everybody's looking at all the opportunities. There is also potentially dead-end roads that are not being used that could be. Well, sometimes there's road right-of-ways that we have that are just
Yeah,
not.
no, I'm just trying to have those one of that neighborhood.
Living in behind there, I don't know, back alleys and stuff.
Yeah, thank you. I was just to clarify through the staff, but we also have a real estate reserve, which is several millions of dollars, I think. Could we not use those monies to buy a park or land for a park?
So your land sale reserve, yes, you could. Again, the real estate strategy is trying to wrap up some of these various funding sources and look and bring some recommendations as to what your best options are for using those funds in certain ways, because there will be projects as we go through that probably have less opportunities for funding than others,
But if an opportunity came up. I'm
absolutely,
suggesting
yeah,
this
if you, exactly, the money's available for any capital expenditure.
He's got one small.
One little baby question, and I wasn't sure if it would go into this in the real estate strategy. Do our staff sort of keep an eye on which neighborhoods are under resourced for parks? Like, do we go, this neighborhood's got X amount of park per population density, and this neighborhood has X amount of park? Do we have a good grasp on that?
Through the chair, yeah, the Parks and Rec Master Plan.
And we think it's up to date?
I suppose that's a relative term. It probably isn't
Because
in
we've had
terms
all
of when
sorts of
we
new
did,
development
yeah,
happen. So I
Right.
just want to make sure we're
on that. Yeah, it's a
making
good
sure
point.
Although I think there was a schedule in the OCP that shows parks and
that's
their,
true,
their
yeah.
distance.
Mhm.
So I think we're getting a bit of a heat map in one of the schedules for the new OCP. I have to move on.
Sorry, I have just one last thing on this, and that's why I'm a little bit surprised that the Denville, it just seems to have, like, I'm surprised there's not already a plan to actually have that done, because, I mean, I think it was identified many, many years ago as being an underserved area, and we are adding a lot of, there's quite a bit of new development happening there, and then, I mean, don't need to get too scientific about it. I mean, it's pretty obvious that the only other neighborhood is the North Yards, right? I mean, so we should just get on it
Yeah,
and
do it.
find a parcel and, let's do it. Because those are the two main areas that I've always seen that I think we're underserved.
Thanks. Okay. Look forward to the report. Alicia or whomever when it comes back. Now we're going to move on to public engagement and or participatory budgeting. And so this came out of a committee of the whole in July, and staff really needs some clarification from us. Because I think we identified the Denville Park project as our participatory budgeting project, and then we were looking at different ways to get input into the budget process. But the longer we delay that, then the input comes very late in the process, sort of after we begin deliberations. And then we wonder how useful it is to us, because we've already made decisions. So I think that's why we're having this conversation. And I'll turn over to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair Elliott. I'm here with Christina Moore, our Manager of Communications, who's going to help me, but I'll start off with our introduction and the presentation. Staff, since that committee of the whole, also following budget debrief, have been talking on a number of occasions on our engagement, what we've done well to date, what's been received, how to get out further ahead of it for the discussion. And so this is where we're at this time. We're looking for some discussion and input, obviously, from the council. So there are four kind of areas that we talked about, and these four will go through in this discussion. Strategic plan, gathering feedback throughout the year, which is something that staff put their minds to. The specific feedback during the actual budget process, and then the fourth being the differentiation of the participatory budgeting project or initiative. So in terms of strategic plan, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but certainly this term, it has helped a lot to align the budget, and this council's been quite successful, in fact successful at coming out with a strategic plan that staff can rely on, and the community sees throughout the entire term as what those priorities are. Looking forward in future years to continuing to get out ahead of the budget with the strategic plan so that all that feedback comes much earlier than when we start actually putting the spreadsheets on the website. So we just term this a long-term focused engagement through the entire term. Feedback throughout the year, we talked last year about, rather than trying to do feedback in a very concise period of time when the budget's happening, is to listen to the themes throughout the year, whether it's complaints or suggestions, feedback from the community. Christina and her team and legislative services, engineering, planning have all done a great job at thinking about the themes. We don't have a formal system to capture it, so it is anecdotal at this time, but it's generally the feedback that comes to us. One example, things that are coming up is the pedestrian overpass on Highway 99, a splash park, a water park, which, to be frank, at this time is not even anywhere near our budget, but we certainly should bring it to council because that's what staff are here. And then in terms of examples where we've already been successful at this, adaptive recreation programming. This is where a group of parents came forward and lobbied and indicated the need for better and more adaptive recreation programming, and then staff worked with that group and started with what we could in the current budget, and then there's future budget asks to continue with that program. Also the partnership with Whistler Adaptive, which made it really feasible. The other organics collection expansion, went out with a survey on that, and then council chose to expand organics because we heard from the community that's what they wanted. So we're hoping that that will continue through the year, and then also in terms of informing the budget. We'll bring forward what we're hearing, recognizing we may not be recommending it or it's even on the radar, but nonetheless it's on the radar for the community. So in terms of the actual during budget process, which seems to be the most difficult nut to crack in terms of getting people to come and hang out with us and talk budget. In 2017, I do believe every year we get better and better. We have a great communications team. We also have better tools all the time through technology that people are engaged with. So the general media channels, chief ads, our website, putting all the budget information on the website, social media, communications pushes out to people, asking them to bring us information back. What was really received well last year were the display boards that we put up at Brennan Park, the library, I believe, so some key senior center, the 55, it was senior centers last year. Last month, it's not received really well. I think the visual, the ability to have a look at it while on your way to an activity or in between when you've got some time. People really appreciated those, and then the mayor's video always gets a lot of uptake and appreciation. So in terms of additional ways to engage this year, these are some of the ideas that staff have come up with. One would be obviously keeping the display boards as a tool. The question to council is timing. So last year the boards came up, people really liked them. The feedback we got though was that they felt it was too late in the process. So as they were learning about the budget, they felt that the horse was pretty much already out of the barn and almost there. Of course, there's risk if we prepare them and put them out earlier or before council's had a really robust look at the budget. It's essentially based on the strategic plan, all of our master plans, but also management recommendations on how we're going to prioritize within a certain parameter. So that would be the risk. And so our question to council is, what risk are you willing to take on in terms of putting it out earlier rather than later?
Do you want us to talk about that?
You can, or I can go through the whole thing and we can come back.
Council, do you want the whole context? Do you want to go through? Yeah, okay.
Whole
I'll keep
context?
going.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Targeted budget items. So this is one that we've talked a lot about as staff. Last year, Sandra put together a few online tools that were presented to you. Challenge last year was marrying it with content, and so this year, staff, we put our minds to how can we do that on behalf of council. So two things would be, one, district proposed budget initiatives, projects, or service increases. We would provide a fact sheet or some creative way of getting that information out. It would be the project, the rationale, the description, and then a very ballpark tax implication. So people can understand the cost and the tax implication. The idea being, do you want this? Are you willing to pay for it, in a sense? So we would do that with specific initiatives that are being proposed in the budget, part of the strategic plan. And then the other could be a few of those things that council's heard, that staff have heard, that aren't necessarily in the budget. So it isn't the splash park. We often hear to increase library hours, parking enforcement, we've heard a lot about. So it's providing that information on that initiative or budget item, and then putting a creative way on the website for people to provide their feedback. So it's an online tool that targets specific, it's kind of like, what are the key questions? What are those crux items that council wants to hear back on? You know, we've certainly put up some examples, but this is where we'd want to hear back from council, and certainly not today, but to plant the seed for you in terms of this tool, this idea, and then we can put them out. So is it 6? Is it, you know, increasing police officers? Is it putting in a splash park? You know, so we'd have like five or six key ones that then the tool would allow you to get feedback on.
Another.
And then participatory budgeting. So do you want us to talk about this separate from the engagement?
Okay.
Sorry. It's, I thought I was going to do myself. I've always thought of participatory budgeting not as, do you want a splash park or do you want something extraneous, as more of distributing resources.
So hold
between-
on, so we're only talking about engagement. There is a difference
Right.
between budget engagement and participatory budget. We are not talking about participatory budget.
Yeah, budget engagement,
We're gonna do that.
exactly.
Just
Is-
talking about engagement.
Right. So engagement for any amount of money spending is redistributing resources that would normally go to one area and being more fair about it and having it be participatory in redistributing it over a larger area. And I really, so as far as targeting budget items, like do you want a splash park or no, doesn't really seem like it's distributing resources. It seems like it's project or like just spending more money, as opposed to redistributing resources across different, more underserved areas. So I think that like library hours isn't really a budgetary, it is sort of budgetary item, parking enforcement, and all those things are regular discussions. And I don't really see how this differs from anything that we've done, except for maybe, so it's just really the online tool you're asking about? And what
Timing of the
item
tool.
and the timing of the tool? Yeah, it had like October, I would say, as far as getting an online tool out there. But I think that it's gonna really depend on what exactly is gonna be in the tool, is dependent on when it should be implemented.
Thank you. Jason.
Okay, so display boards, I'm okay with going a little bit earlier, and I think that's all right. You know, let's make sure we're clear about our disclaimers. This is a draft, blah, 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 but I feel pretty confident based on what we articulated earlier, you know, the fact that we do have this emanating from the strategic plan, so it's not all over the place, like there's been some thought put into it already. In terms of, and display boards I think are great, because that kind of helps people sometimes, you know, cut through the clutter, you know, sometimes all of them just relying on online or those kind of forums, we miss out on opportunities, and catching people, you know, when they're waiting in the lobby during sports activities is a prime time to share that information. For the online tool, I like the idea of just getting some feedback on, yeah, would you like to see a splash park in Squamish? This is around how much we think it costs, you know, yes or no, and then we can just get a sense, like, you know, oh, is this 5 people who really, really want it and nobody else does? Or is it like, oh wow, like we got 200 responses, we should take another look at this. And just anecdotally, based on my Facebook page this summer, that was like the splash park post, it elicited a lot of discussion. So I have a feeling there's something there. And likewise, even with the pedestrian overpass, understanding that of course, you know, that's obviously a provincially driven thing, there's still useful things in collecting that feedback. Because then that allows us to go to the province and say, well look, we did do this work and this is the desire, and so, you know, as long as we're clear about, oh, this is a provincial highway and normally this is cost shared, blah, blah, blah. Parking enforcement, I think that's a great idea. Let's talk about, though, get the message out of like, we've just increased bylaw by this much in this year. We could do more, but it's gonna cost this much, and would you like to see that and just get a sense? And then I wonder, it's not on the screen here, but I'm just wondering if there might be an appetite to just put some few general categories out there and say, how are we doing? You know, on a scale of 1 to 5, how are we doing on parks? You know, a scale of 1 to 5, how are we doing on roads? And then that way, that will allow us to sort of maybe see, like, in terms of public perception and what people are experiencing, like, oh, maybe we need to take a closer look at how we're dealing with parks, or, you know, just to kind of give us some of that thematic information. And, you know, you could also put policing, that kind of thing, park. So that's, I think that would be a good opportunity in addition to the very, very specific projects that we're, you know, putting up there. Is just thematically, it's a temperature check, how are we doing?
Patty, and then Doug, and then Peter.
Yeah, I generally agree with everything Jason said. I don't fear earlier timing. I think we really want to mean that we want public input. We have to put it up front. We can't be scared of what we're going to hear. We may not always 100% align with some of the feedback, but we want it up front. We want that input before our real, I would like that input before we have big deliberative stuff. Jason said our plans, you know, we're pretty strong on our financial plans, our master plans. So I think we're, yeah, I think I agree generally with all the other stuff Jason said. And it just on the, I think what we need, sorry.
I'm just waiting for the little stall and then,
Maybe question.
The synapses are not happening very quickly, but if we just throw out, what do you think of Waterford? What do you think about this? Everyone's going, I love Waterford. If you were in Ontario, it wouldn't have made anybody's list this year, I'll tell you that, but because it was not a good summer. But here, but I think people have to make choices. And that's what participatory budgeting is about. It's about, okay, we have X amount of money. Let's figure out some good community projects. Let's sort of design them, figure out a budget, say, okay, do you want a boat ramp? Or do you want a water? And then people vote. And now we're getting to it. Sorry, we need to do that. But I think it can't just be like, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? It's, you have to prioritize and you have to make choices. You maybe give them a list of 5 and say, prioritize these, yes, but you can't just say, do you like this or do you like this?
Through you, Chair, I think as well as part of that, the intention around this is to move the conversation to when, you know, we often see very little in the way of input into the decision-making process, and then when shovels are in the ground, we hear a whole lot of comments about why didn't they consider this, and why isn't it happening this way? So I think the intention around some of these projects is to move that, try to get that discussion happening while you're making that decision. So it may not simply be as do you want the water park or not, but outlining some of the parameters and the challenges and getting input into those as well. So that's kind of that idea around a fact sheet, almost like we did with the OCP backgrounders on the specific issues. We provide a bit of a situation analysis, some of the considerations that we have to consider, you know, water conservation, all of those different things, and then ask for feedback. And then the tool comes in the way that we could look for some sort of prioritization as well. So try to get a bit more meaningful feedback that will help inform the decision making. Thank you.
Thanks. Just on those points, I agree. In fact, I think it's almost useless if it's not earlier. And I'm thinking about, we had a Finance and Audit Committee meeting when I chaired it, about this time of the year actually, or maybe even earlier, where councillors sort of stated what they thought staff should consider for the upcoming budget. So staff had a chance to kind of suss these things out a little bit, maybe put some numbers to them, so that by the time we did get to the budget, it wasn't a surprise to staff. There was a little bit of information they could give us so that we could make some kind of a decision whether to include it or not. So I think this is similar, and so I think we would want public input at a point where staff could then have a look at it, reflect on it, maybe do some costing, very basic, and then bring it forward so that we can have some actual meaningful discussion around it. Because if it comes up later, then you're just really dealing with some very small amount of discretionary money that we might have in the budget. And I think it's a great idea if we're going to talk about things like splash park, for example, to have the reality check there. This is approximately what it will cost. That equals a 2% tax increase. Or we would have to borrow X dollars and so much a year or whatever, but some reality check so that people understand, yeah, okay, well, we can have all these things, but get ready to write the check for it because that's what it means. In some cases, people might want it. You know, I've often heard that people really do want the amenities. They're prepared to pay for certain amenities, so maybe there are. So, but I think you have to have that, and you have to have that at the start of the process sometimes. I mean, almost now is too late. You have to have that at the start of the process, otherwise you really don't get a chance to deal with it in a fair fashion.
Thanks, Ted. Peter?
Yeah, I agree with Jason. As far as the display boards, I think earlier is better. I like what I've seen. I mean, they're very concisely written by staff. They're laid out in nice bullet points, and people like that sort of tangible thing. They can just walk by and look at it at their leisure when they want to. I think timing, you know, if you're going to do it in conjunction with the online tool as well. I think sort of come up with one solid front, united, so that they have it in their minds where, you know, they see it online, they see it where they go to stores, they see it in Brennan Park, they see it here. And I'm not exactly sure as to how that tool would work, but I would think no more than, you know, 5 to maybe 8 items on it as far as looking, you know, the itemization. Do you want to spend money on this? And to Doug's point about, you know, using the splash park as an example, exactly, reality check. It's like, well, there's a tax implication to this. Are you prepared to? And to those points that we saw on Facebook, which were deluge in some cases, people were quite vocal about saying, you know, I would. I'm not saying that was across the board, but there was some fairly strong comments there about people who were willing to see an increase in their taxes to have that amenity. So I think that reality check needs to be included and say, you know, check this box if you're down for that.
Thanks. I'm going to go to Ted because you explained it. And then we'll
Yeah, I mean, it's, if you went to the seniors and said, what do you think about a new sheet of ice? You know the response you're going to get. I mean, I see it's a difficult thing. I'd like to know if there's any towns out there, if you guys come across, that are doing a good job of it. Maybe send us a link. But I just, you know, like, I don't know how we're going to get all the topics on there. Are we going to ask the community, what do you want? Like Jason said, a lot more money in blacktop. Well, we know a lot of people want more money in blacktop. A lot of people want a sheet of ice. A lot of people, you know, there's so many wants out there. how do we zero it down into what little money we have to spend? I mean, I know, I understand everybody wants to go in this direction, so me too. It just seems quite, anyway.
Any comments, staff?
Yeah, through you, Chair. So two things. One would be collating those themes that we've heard, and Council's heard them too, so working with you on those. Recognizing there are a lot of people that want a lot of things, but what are the themes that are bubbling up? The other, again, would be focusing on the strategic plan. I was just going to pull it up for you, the list of outstanding items. Oh shoot, I hate when it does this. Do you know how to make it switch? Anyway. So there's a list that council has seen before and is available to the public. And again, so that's the strategic plan that is informing staff's recommendation for the budget itself. So to answer the question would be focusing on those two areas, recognizing we'll never capture everything. And I know that council was asked to rank these. However, the responses were so disparate that we've just asked staff to scope it all, and then we'll bring it to the budget process.
And somehow we always get to a budget.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ted, does that help?
Well, it does, yeah. I mean, I like the water park has been one where that I've heard for years and years, so, I'll go with that with you. I mean, I don't quite, seeing is believing.
Yeah, fair enough. Susan and Jason?
Thanks, and I'm just going to quickly point out that resources to do policy as well, making sure that we're appropriately staffed in this year's budget, might supersede actually having money for other things like splash park. Our policy and I think about just like our building policy and our economic development policy aligning just isn't up to snuff. We're, for obvious reasons, lacking space and still have no policy that addresses that. And I wonder how in this process that sort of gets embedded in, I'd like to see public expectations brought along with our budget in the fact that we are going to need to have staff to address the growth in our community and the policy implications with all of that and ensuring that we have appropriate policy. And I think that on a board would be a great place to sort of just preempt conversation about that without having and have those conversations so that we can ensure appropriate staffing levels for this budget as well.
If I may, Chair, it is a very good point. If we go out with a tool that's based solely on projects, it doesn't holistically look at the whole budget and the impact. So all of those other things, the master plans, the infrastructure, the administration that are required. So someone may look at the water park and go, it's only $500,000, darling, on this much budget. But so that is still a challenge that we're trying to crack here in terms of, I mean, the idea also with this, some sort of creative online tool is just getting people there and looking and thinking and maybe asking more questions.
Can I just follow up with that?
We're over time.
I just want to make one quick comment that I think that in an online tool, it could be valuable saying, we have to have staffing resources. If there's projects, there's staffing resources required, and that has to be included in that budget. So just making sure that we don't forget about the staffing resources and the back end that those projects take, and that it's all considered in those budgetary tools. So, maybe there's some way we can align on, like that you're going to need policy tools and other things to, economic development. And all those little projects are great, but really cost us in the back end and take focus away from other things that we really find important right now.
So recognizing that this is always a challenging issue for us to undertake, I still think in order to actually be able to have the tool be effective and people actually use the tool and provide the feedback. We gotta be careful about the scope. And so I understand that there are a bunch of other issues to do, but I mean, I think that that might be better addressed in different forums rather than an online sort of setting. And I wanted to find out if perhaps we might consider some very targeted engagement this time with the Chamber of Commerce and some other organizations where we go to them and not just expect them to, you know, come to us or go to the meeting and really get that out there in early on. Other groups too. And then also just finally to Ted's point, I think what we're asking, like what I was suggesting in the thematic thing, it's not to say what do you want us to spend more money on or whatever, it's just more a temperature check of how we do. And that's, I think that's good feedback just in general to know, and then we, through the other tools and decisions we make, can be informed by that. And I think it's just so important not to make it too complicated. I mean, if people have to spend half an hour or 45 minutes, nobody's gonna do that. It's gotta be short, sweet, and you know, we can always look at it next year if there's some other projects that come up, we'll add those, but you know, let's not overwhelm.
So I concur with my colleagues on timing, the earlier the better. I think for me, because we need to take incremental steps because we will either overwhelm the public or we'll overwhelm council in trying to incorporate this feedback and in the fact that we have a big budget discussion to get to. So I think less is more this time around. I agree with Jason that we can't just, or Patty, sorry, that we just can't ask you if you'd like this. Everyone likes these things. But I think we have to be really clear somehow in saying these things aren't in our financial plan right now. But if they were, how would you prioritize them against these other special projects and get people to rank them that way? Because I don't want to create an expectation. There's a splash park in the budget. Just because we've put it on a website saying, would you like this or prioritize it? So I think we have to be quite clear, like, this stuff hasn't been budgeted, but we've heard that people are interested in this. How would you prioritize it against the other priorities that we're also grappling with, which might be some of what's on our strategic plans. But I think we need to focus on our strategic plan, the key things we've heard, and then keep it short and to the point. Because we know people won't wade through a lot of data to do this. They'll want a one-page like slide. And I like Jason's idea of just temperature checking on a few things. That's a great idea. How are we doing on active transportation? How are we doing on parks, roads, healthy communities, whatever. And that's a simple one. Okay, I think you want to talk about.
Yeah, very quickly. Definition notwithstanding, this year's project was the Dentville Park, as we spoke about just recently. And we have been looking at other communities. One example that came through was the City of Victoria. They have a really fun booklet on their participatory budgeting project. No disrespect to Victoria, but for the whole city, it's $50,000 project. So they're probably spending more administratively to run the project than the project.
They're baby steps too.
Said, it's baby steps, absolutely. You don't want to come out of the gate with $5 million, right? $50,000 is a lot to the general citizen. So they've done committees and they've got this program going, and it's wide open what the community can do with this $50,000. Our baby step last year was less wide open. It was a parameter. So we are spending this money on a park in this area. Come out and tell us what you want the money to do. So I guess I'll leave it there with council in terms of if you want to repeat another project like the Dentville Park or the Willow Park idea, do an open project like this.
Okay. Everyone has like 1 minute.
Yeah. So I think I like the idea of this. It's just a small piece of participatory budgeting, but I do think we try to still control it too much in terms of pick these three structures, which ones do you like? Like maybe Dentville wants a pump track and a this and a that. And like, I think we do need to really have the community feel like the ideas and the programming is really coming from them, because that's our intention. And not to, you know, here's the catalog, which one do you want? Like that's not participatory democracy at all. So I like the idea of neighborhoods really getting involved in what the programming in a park might look like for a neighborhood. Do you want community gardens? Do you want this? Whatever it is, but broaden it. With participatory budgeting, and you know, that it's interesting what Victoria is doing. You know, that I think that's sort of the next baby step is here's X amount of money. We sort of did it with the legacy funding. We have $750,000. Bring us your ideas. We sort of did it with that. Council ultimately made the decision. It wasn't a voting process by the public, but it was a baby step. But and I think that's the difference between engagement on the budget and participatory budgeting. They're not one and the same. There's a whole lot of slew of stuff that we have to do with engagement on operational issues and augmentation of service and all that. That's a whole other thing. Participatory budgeting is really about, you know, a very small percentage of your overall budget. But I really like the idea that we can really empower the community to come up with the ideas and come up with the program and then actually go out and vote. I mean, participatory budgeting is about voting. It's not just about getting feedback from the community, it's about voting. It's about you get your vote, how to spend this tax dollar. And I don't know if people know the history of participatory budgeting, but it came out of South America predominantly, where you had have and have-not communities. And of course, people on councils were from have communities generally, and the have-not communities really were not treated fairly. And it was a way of equalizing tax dollars out to everybody. And it really started to get involved. You know, Harlem's done them. So I think people don't really understand what participatory budgeting, but it's about voting. So people having a say in how this chunk of money is spent, not just. So I think I'd like to see us take that next step in 2018.
Jason, Doug, Susan.
I like the idea of, you know, using a park because it's very place-based, and so it's something that people, it's a very experiential thing and very not sort of you know, numbers and charts and all that. It's like, okay, have this space that you know is in your neighborhood. How are you going to use it? So I like that because it is very much, you know, it's like 100% a municipal responsibility. We don't have to get complicated about it. And I would agree that, you know, the Denville Park, it's a step in the right direction, and, you know, hoping to see that we can move that along further. And, you know, ideally over the longer term, yeah, I mean, it would be great if we, you know, basically, you know, broke it down by neighborhood and said, you know, every year each neighborhood gets $100,000 for neighborhood improvements, and go and, you know, do it. And, you know, anything that gets us closer to that, I think is very helpful, and building that capacity. And I think that's the thing that municipalities can struggle with when you know, maybe the capacity isn't there. So at least giving some tangible project. And you know, I'm pleased to hear that we've gotten 200 responses. I think that's actually quite impressive for a small neighborhood area. So hopefully, I'm pretty excited about it.
Doug?
Yeah, I just wonder how worthwhile or valuable the response to something like that might be. And I think I'm a little bit more in favor of focusing it a bit. But I think if we do the things on the previous screen well, that in effect should go part of the way towards that. You know, we're talking about people expressing an opinion, which I guess call a vote or an expression of opinion. It's not a binding vote, but I don't think we're quite there yet. I don't think we're at the so much per neighborhood, you go figure it out kind of thing and see what you get. So I'm not exactly there right now. I like the idea of what we saw on the first page, getting ideas, letting people know that there's costs involved, and would you like to see some certain things, a range of opportunities. Because people will never vote for sidewalks, they'll never vote for sewers and all that kind of stuff. So we're talking about kind of the extras to these things. Parks are an excellent example. So I'm more on the first page, not the second page.
Susan?
Thank you. I think this is IEP 2, I don't think this is participatory budgeting. IEP 2 is consulting the public in order to design a park and make it, or design a space. And I like the idea of using IEP 2 to consult and not working at the level of inform. If it was participatory, it would involve the entire community for deciding on a park somewhere and spending the money over a larger community thing. So this is just IEP 2 and making sure that we're designing a park appropriately. Whether it has, we already have a budget number, it's not deciding. But I agree with the mayor is that that it may not be park equipment that we're deciding on, it may be how do we utilize the space. But still operating in the IEP 2 framework as we have set aside means that we're actually consulting the public on what they want to see in the space. I don't see really how it's participatory budgeting and why one park and deciding on equipment would be budgeting, except for, because we've already set, it's not involving in the bureaucracy or anything. It's, we have this, we've already decided on the budget number, and now we're deciding on what we want to do with the space. So I agree with Councillor Race that the first board and online tool can be a little bit more participatory for the entire community, whereas this is a neighborhood project that is an IEP 2 project.
Do you have what you need?
Well, this is what we were going to ask for you, but I think from today we have enough to get started and come back to council with something more concrete that you can comment on and add to. What I would ask council in the interim is, are there specific questions you want integrated into the tool? What themes are you wanting to capture? It's ultimately feedback for you.
So for me, on the participatory budgeting front, we haven't even finished our debt bill project. So we haven't learned from that yet because we haven't completed it. So I'm kind of hesitant to actually choose another participatory budgeting project because I thought this one would be further along at this point, but it's not. So I'm kind of hesitant to sort of pick another one when we're still learning from this process. So I'd rather see us do our engagement really well this year, and if a couple of projects fall out of our budget deliberations that we can't find consensus on, maybe that's an opportunity to send something out for a vote. But I feel like we're still playing catch up on last year, and we haven't sort of learned all of our lessons from that yet. And I don't know, I think for me, the engagement tool is about our strategic plan and anything we might have discretion about. You've shown us that there's things that are already planned that we're doing, but then there's other items that we get to have some discretion on holding during the budget deliberations, and I think that's where I'd like community feedback. Jason?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm okay with actually, penciling this in for another project of similar scale. And I would like to see if perhaps there are things, specifically investments in our parks, whether they be at a neighborhood level or whatever. If there is already something in the budget for that, that's going to happen, and we apply the lens to that. Sort of similar budget, 50,000, that kind of range. So, I'd like to be able to consider that when you guys come back. And yeah, for the if we are going to do the sort of the project-based thing on the online tool, I'd like to see a pedestrian overpass at Cleveland and 99. I want a pulse on that one. The splash park.
Are we really going to get into this right now?
I don't think this wasn't the intent that
Yeah.
I understood.
No.
This is the process we're talking about, yeah.
Well,
If I can
Can you
Budget
clarify,
context.
because I didn't realize we were going to get into the legal on this.
This is overall council direction. We didn't expect to get all of it today. Sorry for the confusion, because number 3 does say input on targeted budget content. But what we've heard today and what I'll take away is yes to early on the boards with the caveats that it's draft. do you want the budget tool as we've presented, but we'll bring it back in a more concrete form, at which point council can weigh in with more of the themes and content that you want in there. And then participatory budgeting, as the budget comes back to you. I'm hearing two things. I'm hearing
Yeah, you are hearing
50,
two things.
so.
Jason, is that?
Yep.
Sorry, to cut you off.
Susan?
On the online tool, would it be possible to have whatever projects have a sliding scale, like from whatever money amount to whatever money amount we decide on, so that it is a budgetary, not a, yes, I want this project, or no, I want this project, and this is how much it costs, but this is how much I'm willing to pay out of my personal budget. Like, I'm willing to pay $20 on my tax bill, I'm willing to pay $30 on my tax bill, and then it's a sliding scale where they can feel like, oh, I'm actually, willing to pay $50 on my tax bill to have this maybe. And then it feels a little bit more participatory to me, and make it personalized instead of an overall. I don't think people understand the overall arching, like it's gonna cost $1 million, no way, but it's gonna cost you this amount on your bill instead of a percentage or anything else, just like in the small ranges.
So we have another meeting, we have to start in 4 or 5 minutes from now. Jason?
I just want to add to that though, that maybe it would be more appropriate to say like per person or
Yeah,
something.
exactly.
Small, much because tax bills vary according to.
Per person doesn't get any easier on that. Just up the complication factor there.
So does that give you enough to go with?
It does, thank you.
All right. And so will this come back at the next finance and audit
Yeah.
committee? So there's no recommendations to council or referrals from. Let me know if you have any topics you'd like to see on the next finance and audit committee meeting by email. Motion to moved by Peter, seconded by Jason, all in favor. All motion carries. Thank you.